in the Hall. I'm Amanda Ray. With me today is Dan Robinson. We are here to discuss Hall of Fame for Northwest Arkansas Musicians Connection. Thanks for joining us today, Dan.
Happy to be here.
So, let's just go back to how I know you.
Okay.
Dr. Dan.
All right.
Dr. Dan was in my ears on the radio station on Sunday nights on 104.9 The X.
Yes.
How long was your show on the air?
So the Local X story was kind of funny because Local X pre-existed me. I mean, it was happening, and there was a group of people who were DJing it, essentially. There was like this team. And the politically correct way to tell this story is that team essentially had a big kerfuffle, and at the time I was a guest appearance. So when I heard there was a local music show, I said I would be happy to do a little segment for the show where I do a music theory analysis of local bands' songs. Just because, I mean, if people don't know music theory, then they're just writing songs without a real, it's like, well, what am I even playing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just playing it because it feels good. And so it's like, I can talk about why it feels good and what they're doing and the things that they could do to potentially make it better.
So a music critic.
I jokingly called it Dr. Dan's Musical Autopsy.
Nice.
I don't know if you remember those.
Yes, I do.
Dr. Dan's Musical Autopsy was a guest segment that I would do on the show. So I did that. That was like 2005 that I started doing that, 2004, 2005-ish. And then the hosts of the show got in this big spat, and then everybody quit. And I was the only one left. Like, I was just close enough involved that I was like, everybody quit. And then I was like, I'll do Local X. And it was myself and Eric Halsell, Eric the Head. So it was my co-host.
Yes, I know.
And so Eric and I did the show, I would say probably for 2005. And then in 2006, Eric left the show, and then it was just me. And it was like, I believe this is an important thing. I believe it's an important resource. And so I'm going to commit every Sunday night to coming in and playing 20 local bands. We had a 1 hour slot, but then Dave gave us a 2 hour slot, so it was 8 to 10. We did 10 to midnight for a long time, but it was harder for people to tune in, so I finally got Dave to move us back to 8 to 10. That was the perfect slot for the local bands. And it was amazing to have the opportunity to be connected with local bands, to share their music. They'd be hitting me up like, hey, we've got a new single, let's get it out. And then there was fun stuff like Dwight Chalmers had the Listening Lab studio at the time, and I knew that he was mixing local bands and that many of the mixes that were coming my way were coming from his studio. And he and I developed a relationship where I would let him know when I was playing the stuff, or he would hit me up and be like, hey, will you play this on the radio so I can see how it sounds on the radio so we can adjust accordingly. So it just provided me a great opportunity to serve the local music scene that I was a part of. So that's, for 10 years, 2006 to 2016, I did 50 shows a year.
So back in the age of MySpace.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. So in that time, and even before you kind of took over in 2005, we have such a different age now where we're able to connect to television, radio, podcasters through several social media platforms.
Yeah. Too many.
How did they get a hold of you then? Was there an ad in the local newspaper? How did you get in touch with your
It was mostly
artists?
word of mouth, but people would drop off their CDs at the station.
Physical CDs?
Oh, yeah. They would come by the station. Oh, yeah, and that's all we could do. I would have to rip it off a CD or play it off a CD live, but we would pre-track the show, so it was live when I started, and then I got to a place where I would be able to go in the afternoon, program the show, and then go home and listen to it. So that was nice.
I have a secret to admit. I got tasked with cleaning the garage out at the X one time, and I came across a bunch of those local music CDs that had been dropped off at the station. They now exist in my house, in my personal collection, because to me that was a treasure trove. That's people's hard-earned time and work, and that's their art. And please buy my album. And please listen.
It's the title written in Sharpie in the hand of the artist that it is, in a weird way, it's its own piece of art that just depends on how much you value that thing, you know? It's super cool.
Did you ever get to bring any of those bands in for promotion?
Oh, yeah. We would do interviews, we would do in-studio performances, and then when I built my home recording studio, then I would even like take them to my home recording studio, record studio performances, and then broadcast them on the X.
That's a lot of dedication.
It was a lot of fun. I just really enjoyed having the opportunity to see people do cool stuff. And
Now, I spoke with Jackson to kind of prepare for, this interview, and he was mentioning that, yes, that the local radio station actually, the local radio station effort, I should say, actually does predate the 2005 era. It goes way back to the 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
Do you have any?
I came onto the scene in 2002. My wife and I moved here in 2002. So that was where I began.
That was your
Fayetteville.
introduction.
Yeah. Yep.
So tell me about what it was like to come here, and you're not sure, you don't know anybody. How did you get connected to the people that you are now connected with in the scene?
Well, I was thrown into the deep end because I was hired initially as the sound guy at George's Majestic Lounge. So I did that for about 6 months. But then my wife and I managed George's Majestic Lounge from 2002 to 2005.
Nice.
When then the owners sold it to Brian Crown and Susie Stevens.
Little known fact.
So
what was that like for you? What all did that entail?
I had never run a bar before. I was 24, 25 years old. And of course, there was this rich history of people here, and there were a lot of personalities. And we had the Chester's crew, and we had like Dave's on Dixon, and there was like some pretty thick stuff to have to try to learn about quickly. Fortunately, Brian Crown was amazing. He came in right out of the gate and was like, now that you're responsible for this thing, you need to understand how to work it right. And I just opened up the books, and he explained to me as far as booking goes. At the time when I came on, this is kind of a fun thing. It was back when music was still king on Dixon, right? Happy Hour Friday night was the gig that was going to be slammed no matter who you were. So bands were scrapping for that slot because the live music fans were rabid, and they would come out. Game nights were gonna be a home run no matter who was playing. And so it was a very different time in music. And I caught the very tail end of that. And that was the era in which Jason Boland and the Stragglers and Cross Canadian Ragweed were like the biggest draws. They were huge.
That's your ticket sellers.
And so as a result, when I took over George's, the person who was working there at the time was trying to discover the next Jason Boland and Cross Canadian Ragweed because they had gone over to Dave's. They weren't playing at George's anymore. So they were paying these guarantees to these red dirt rock bands on Wednesday nights and just bleeding money looking for that next band. So I immediately stopped that and was like, we're gonna book local bands for a door split, and we're gonna make it so that, we can start to build some local synergy again and not try to find the next big Texas band.
Do you remember who your first local band that you booked at George's?
No. When I came in, there was already kind of a system in place. So, but the people on the books were like like the Cape Brothers and Oreo Blue and the Nace Brothers and the Bel Airs, and so that good old time, those classic, and then Hunker Down was huge at that time. B was still kind of on the scene, so there were several contingents like that had their own followings and had momentum that I came in and just tried to respect. It was like, these guys do real well, let's put them at just the right frequency so they don't overplay. But again, this was before, the whole internet era.
At that time, I feel like there were battle of the bands. There was kind of a community camaraderie towards wanting to be that next band.
Yep.
Did you ever participate in any of those, and what were you looking for if you did?
Not necessarily. We were just trying to book local bands that would bring people in and keep things consistent, and we were able to do that. And then we were able to start venturing into those bigger name acts. But another one that was a big presence on the scene at that time was Clunk. Clunk Music Hall was, you know, the all ages venue. So that was the place where bands could go tap into that crowd that was 18 or under.
I never got a chance to go to Clunk. My mom wouldn't let me come to Fayetteville. We lived out in Elkins, out in the sticks, and that was just not a drive she was willing to make for us to wait around and then come back and pick us up. That didn't happen, but that was always the buzz at schools. Yeah, we're gonna go to Clunk. We're gonna, and it made it just seem like that's the place to be. And now, at 40 years old, now 20 plus years later, when hearing back about, it still seems like that was absolutely just, there was magic there. Yeah.
So we ran George's for the 2 years, and then I took 2005 off so that, at that time I was building my studio. And doing some things like that. And then Brian brought me back in 2006 as his production manager.
Nice.
So then I was the lead sound engineer from 06 to 08. And then I stepped away in 08. And at that time, back in 05-ish, there was this 17-year-old scrappy guy named Arlie Stiles who wanted to learn how to mix. And I was like, you're not allowed in here, but come on, let's get you behind the board and let's figure this out. And then for me as a performer, I knew I wanted to get into the scene and I wanted to find my vein. And so the first band I was in was Dave Stiles and the Jones Crusher.
Nice.
So when I saw Dave play, I was like, I would love to play drums for you. So I played drums for the blues bands. And then in 2005, I started my metal band, Rot. So Rot was on the scene from 05 to essentially 12. We did a run from 05 to 08 where we quickly kind of became one of the big heavies on the scene. We had our first gig at the Gypsy, at Chris Gray's Metal Night at the Gypsy.
Yes, I remember those.
That was our first gig, and then we cut a EP, and then we cut our first full-length record. And then Ruben and, got word of what we were doing. Several people got word of what we were doing, and then we started getting offered to open for Saliva and Drowning Pool. And, when Nationals would come in, we would be the opening act, so.
Did you happen to play for, what was it called, the X Fest?
Probably.
There was
one way
10
or another,
bands.
I remember those, yeah.
So 10 major acts that came through.
Yeah. So yeah, I was able to, as a performer, work in the metal space. I worked in the blues space, the rock and blues space. I was in a cover band. I was in Take Cover for a couple of years, and got to play covers and expand my repertoire that way. And then with Nathan Aronowitz.
Yes.
They brought him to me when he was 14, and I produced his first record and managed the band, and we won the Blues Challenge, and we went to the International Blues Challenge, and he went on to Belmont and got a degree, and now he has a great little group he's touring around doing awesome things.
I follow him on Instagram.
Yeah. Sugar Leg.
Yes, he never ceases to amaze me. We did a gig at Rowdy Beaver one night. Our band kind of adopted him too. You couldn't not bring this young man in with your group, because I play with older musicians.
Right.
They've been around for a while, and I feel like sometimes they got a little complacent with their place on stage, and then here comes Nathan.
Yeah.
And they are struggling to keep up with him, and they're excited, and you can see back again where they become that young musician again. He just inspired that. But he was playing guitar, keyboard at the same time, while reaching under the keyboard and grabbing French fries.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And still maintaining his 16-year-old appetite.
I remember the rehearsal where I was like, man, you can do both at the same time. And he was like, what? I said, you could do like left-hand guitar, right-hand keys. And he was like, I can't.
You taught him that?
I mean, it's not that I taught him that. I knew that it was already there. The kid was just so talented. Harmonica.
Yes.
And then
vocals.
Guitar, vocals, keyboards, just monster keyboard player, but just really good guitar player too. So yeah, playing with him was a blast, and I was the drummer in that band, was able to hold it down and in that regard and manage the rehearsals.
So what is Dr. Dan doing musically these days?
Well, so I'm still, my bachelor's degree was in music composition.
Nice.
So I went to the University of Missouri in Kansas City's Music Conservatory, and I got a conservatory degree in music composition. So my musical journey professionally started essentially composing for media, for things that needed scores. I was scoring films and commercials for friends who were doing small scale stuff in Kansas City. And then right after I graduated, I was hired to be a resident composer at a theater company as well. So I was writing music to support theater productions that were being done in the inner city of Kansas City as a community thing. So I always loved like mixed mediums. I liked being able to compose for theater, compose for film, compose for television, and then perform as, it felt good. So I was doing all those things. So film scoring has always kind of been at the core of everything that I've always done. And what was funny was as I was scoring things and I would drop off the files and watch my friends drop in the files, and I watched the editing platform, I saw what they were working in, I was like, that looks just like the nonlinear editor that I'm using to write music, so I might as well learn how to edit. So I did, and then it was like, well, now that I know how to edit, I might as well shoot stuff that I can edit so I can score it. And so I did that, and it was like everything I was doing, I was becoming a producer with the goal of scoring, but like I was doing all this work so that at the end I could write the music. So I still do that, and we're still working on Rot, new material for Rot. I still scratch that metal itch when I feel like I need to, so.
Do we get to see a Rot Fayette Tunes performance anytime soon? Will that be coming up?
I don't know. We'll have to see. There's,
I hope I get to
keeping a band
operate
together,
the
right?
camera that day.
Yeah, it'll be fun. But yeah, it's been incredible to watch the last 20 years of the music scene here and see how the internet really did change it. How the whole dynamic of how people socialize and what people expect out of local music, and the fact that this thing that was this precious thing that you could only get in one place became something that everyone could get on their cell phones.
Yes.
And then how that impacted the fact that they were going more for an experience and less for the music. Like, they can get the music anytime. What they can't do is experience the, guitar player throwing that beer at the audience or whatever. Like, that's the thing that draws people to live music.
Absolutely.
In this new, 21st century era. But then I was able to, in 2012, I was hired to run Fayetteville Public Television. And just like with Local X, I felt like Local X gave me the opportunity to celebrate and elevate all the music that was happening in a way that would impact a lot of people. And I saw that in Fayetteville Public Television too. This was going to be an opportunity for me to empower other people to produce all sorts of different things, centralize those on a channel, but then also create things where people would bringing their stuff to me. It's like, hey, I want to be a part of what you're doing, and here's what I do. And then it's like, hey, now I know that you do that. So if I need a bluegrass band, I know I can call you. If I need a banjo player, I know I can call you. So it's a networking, for me it's always networking, and it's about being in watchtowers. I like being in a watchtower over the scene. And then it's like, I can see what's going on and be like, hey, those people need, this to just be awesome. And like, these people are great at this.
In my mind, when I created the Northwest Arkansas Musicians Connection, it was a Rolodex.
Right.
It was just kind of, it was a Facebook group. The Facebook groups weren't really a big deal in 2011. They were just kind of like an afterthought. It was where you would plan your 6-year-old's birthday party and invite grandma and grandpa and share the photos afterwards, right?
Yeah.
And I remember we had the tornadoes that affected Joplin, and then 2 days later wiped out Denning and Altus down here. And a couple of friends and I remember saying, if people are still sleeping, and this was in May when the tornadoes happened, my birthday's in September, and I remember if people are still sleeping in tents in our state without getting any FEMA response, and we got Good Morning America going to Joplin. Yeah. And we have people 20, 30 miles away sleeping in tents in 100-degree weather. They're still sleeping in tents for my birthday. I'm going to go. I threaten all kind of wild, crazy things to bring attention to the matter, but what it really came down to was we called George's
Yeah.
and said, so I got about 22 bands
Right.
that are willing to volunteer time and effort towards our state,
Yeah.
towards people here that really need our attention while Good Morning America is helping. And bless Joplin,
Yeah,
they
yeah.
were devastated, but we were also.
Yeah.
And so one evening, I'm just sitting, I'm like, how am I going to keep up with all these people that are messaging me and connecting with me? And started a Facebook group
Yeah.
with 15 people.
Yeah.
And overnight, I woke up the next morning and there were 85. So I shut it down to a private group because I was like, okay, we can't let it get 85 people. That's a lot. That's a lot. I don't know. And, now we're daily growing. I still get 3 to 4 requests a day, and I make sure they're not bots. They answer
Right.
questions. A lot of I would say 90% musicians that request. About 5% fans.
Yeah.
People that are just dedicated and absolutely want to know who's playing where. They spend their their disposable income
Yeah.
on local entertainment, on the restaurant that has I know for my boyfriend and I, we're gonna go to Cheers on Friday, the old post office.
Yeah.
We're gonna go to George's.
Yeah.
Happy hour. We're gonna wander down to the piano bar for a little bit to watch those crazy musicians go off and entertain barely 21-year-olds all
Right,
night long. And then we're gonna go home, and then that's where we're happy for our economic impact to be placed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Seeing that kind of connectivity and that kind of growth, it makes me believe that we do have something very special in Northwest Arkansas. I think being in Northwest Arkansas will put you on the map. It's not that any one human from Northwest Arkansas has put Northwest Arkansas on the map.
Right.
I think being here in Northwest Arkansas is the goal. Because of the resources we have.
It's
folks like
fertile
you.
ground, there's fertile ground here, but we did notice that when the venues, when the game changed, then the venue game changed.
That's true.
And so then what we saw was, whereas before there were lots of venues to choose from, then we saw the venues narrow and become more focused. It's not that they disappeared, that when people are like, there's no more venues anymore, it's like, well, no, there are venues, and they're good venues.
They're laser
but
focused on what you want.
and, making sure that it's actually gonna connect with a crowd. Because again, it's not like people are just going out wondering what's gonna happen. They're being very deliberate, like you. I mean, it's like they know exactly who's playing and where they're gonna go and what they're gonna do. So it takes that kind of focus to make it happen, but there are so many resources here. What's interesting is people tend to feel like they need to reinvent those resources. We end up working in silos individually, and it's like, I'm gonna get a group of people around me, and this is not just in music. I'll tell you from both my watchtowers, it's fascinating for me to watch artists in general continue to try to reinvent things rather than really working together to build something that has that much power. When we're working together, there's so much more richness and diversity and power to what we're doing than if we're just doing it with people who are like us or just like us.
Yeah.
Right? So that is the biggest challenge of this ecosystem, is people setting their egos aside, celebrating each other, which I believe the Hall of Fame is gonna do, give us the opportunity to just straight up celebrate each other. It's not a competition. It's like, these are the people that are laying the groundwork that other people should be able to step on.
Yes.
Then when we've got these new awesome bands coming out right now that have, in some ways, things that we had never thought about, but also things that feel very familiar. Being able to document those and then give them the tools that we wish we had is what fuels me in the work that I do, is seeing that work, seeing those people activate those resources, and then learning about other people. When we have Fayette Tunes, then there's also the Anvil sessions, and there's also like several other organizations that are doing music videos. We're not the only ones, But what we're doing is unique to us, and we're just covering that ground, and it takes a village. It takes everybody working to make it all happen. So it's fascinating. The other, like a fun topic of discussion for me is Little Rock and Northwest Arkansas.
Let's talk about Little Rock and Northwest Arkansas.
It is across the board in art that they just don't talk.
I feel like we have a better pipeline to Kansas City and Tulsa
Yes.
than we do to Little Rock in our own state.
Which is closer, and it's the capital, and it's just fascinating to me that Little Rock bands don't really play Northwest Arkansas all that much. Northwest Arkansas bands don't play Little Rock all that much. There are some that do. I'm not saying that nobody does.
Right.
But if you think about what it would be like if we were really connected and supporting each other, that would be an opportunity for local musicians to make more of a living because they would be able to have a regional circuit they could play within their own state. And there are so many people who are kind of trying to lay those, like the breadcrumbs for the bands of like, here's how you do this. But it takes work. Having a band, making a TV show, all that sort of stuff you've got to have tenacity. And you've just got to keep working until it's done.
It is absolutely a job. It is absolutely a business. It is something that I think the hobbyist musician might take for granted. The full-time, fast-paced industry that absolutely is the music business. You can go from, your favorite band, the four-man trio, which is just three guys, and then the audience guy that helped them drag their drums in, all the way up to the Walmart amp.
Yeah.
Where you've got anywhere from 100 to 300 stagehands backstage scrambling, and then you've got your front of house, and you've got, probably 500 to 700 people just making a show happen.
Yeah.
One second, forgot my train of thought, because I just got this image of all of the people that come through and make it happen. I feel like each one of those people that are part of that are just as important as the human on the stage and the musician that's on the stage. Your watchtowers that you watch from, if you were to pick out a couple of, let's say, venues or events that you've really seen people come together and do a great job, Hall of Fame worthy. Can you name a couple?
Wow. As far as venues goes, each one kind of has its own, it takes the different types of niches to make for a full scene. You can, like George's is obviously like the catch-all, where just because it's so iconic. But then when it comes to the individual venues, we brought up Clunk was legendary. Chester's was obviously, a fascinating chapter in the music history here, and so that and then Nomads has had a interesting history as well.
I do love Nomads. We shot the songwriters circles there for a couple of years, and Jeremy Brown has an appreciation for the DIY musician.
Yeah.
And that is something that most business and restaurant owners that have music as an afterthought don't maybe understand or appreciate, whereas Jeremy is highly educated in a lot of the law and a lot of the things with BMI, ASCAP, and licensing, and things that I, at that time, didn't fully understand as a budding songwriter. And he was very gracious to provide a venue for a lot of bands. And I would say that there was a Backspace was probably another one of those that people talk about the most, being just a DIY venue. How
I have strong opinions about DIY venues.
That was what I was going to ask. How does a DIY venue versus George's? Give me your opinion.
My opinion is don't do it. Don't have a DIY venue. Have a house party where you're inviting your friends and a band. But you cannot publicize that. To me, that's the difference. If you're like, hey, this band is coming to my house, anybody show up. You know, when you are publicizing that way, it creates a terrible set of circumstances for everyone. You don't have the infrastructure that keeps the musicians safe.
That's true.
It's first and foremost.
It's a liability.
It's a liability. They're bringing thousands of dollars worth of gear into this place that does not have security, that does not have noise ordinance, awareness, that's probably going to get shut down, where the chances of someone doing something illegal are very high. And all the band wants to do is connect with an audience, right?
Right.
And the reason that we have professional venues is so that musicians can connect with an audience in a safe space.
What about that band that can't get booked at that professional venue?
House party. That is a house party. That's when you invite your friends over, and then nowadays with video, people bust out their
Right.
cell phones, and then you've got something where it's like, look at these guys connecting with this small group at this house party. That didn't have to be a DIY venue. That was
Right.
essentially a glorified rehearsal with some audience. And that's where you should start it, in my opinion. And then with resources like this around here, a band could come in here and record.
You're absolutely right.
And then they have that proving ground. They don't have to try to get a gig for somebody. Then they're going to do that networking to connect with bands that are already established and get that opening slot. But they've got to be aware of just the basic etiquette and, the things that makes it, you don't play more than your 30-minute slot when you're an opening band, if
Yeah.
that's the case. If you're like, oh, one more, they love us, then you're stomping on the guys who gave you that opportunity. There are things like that I think bands need to learn by observing.
Yep.
When you go to shows and you see you see how people act, and it's like, what was it that made that show awesome for you? Well, it was timed out right. There was just enough time for me to get a drink in between the acts. The next band sounded great right out of the gate. The first two songs weren't a sound check because everybody's doing their job. So
One person who you brought him up earlier, and I'd like to highlight him again, a person that did a lot for bringing the bands from, and I'm referring to younger metal bands that I know and love, from those house parties to a real place, was Ruben Medina.
Yeah,
He had a
yeah.
showcase at the Northwest Arkansas Mall for 3 or 4 years, I want to say.
yes.
And these were, again, these teenage bands up into their early 20s, doing 20-minute showcases, no backline. He was
I
really
mixed a lot
teaching
of those.
them.
Yeah, at Gymnastics Joe's, that was at the
Yeah,
yeah,
they were
at the
out
mall.
standing
Yeah.
in front of harps selling tickets. Hey, buy a ticket to my show.
Yep.
And I really got to see, I guess maybe I took for granted that the shows that I booked, I really lucked myself into. I just happened to get the gig, but watching these kids drag that heavy and metal gear, they've got
Yeah.
stacks on stacks.
Absolutely.
And they're standing in the heat in front of the harps and begging little old ladies to buy their tickets. That's really seeing the work. And Ruben really gave them an opportunity and a chance to get out of the garage and into I love Ruben. Hopefully we'll get him in here soon.
Absolutely.
And
what Ruben did was bring regional and national level acts to George's at his own expense.
out of his own pocket.
That's right. And then would offer the local bands the opportunity to open up for their heroes. So, we got to open up for Drowning Pool at George's because of a Ruben show. We got to open up for Mushroom Head at George's because of Ruben. So,
I asked him why one day. Why do you come out of your own pocket?
Yeah.
You're not a musician.
yeah,
I love these bands.
yeah,
Straight
That's
face,
right.
as hard as he could. I love these bands.
yeah.
He happened to know a guy from the Seven Dust tour, got them booked, and then it just kept going well for him. Again, he's not making his money back.
Yeah,
He is
was
having
happy
a
to
blast.
He was happy to break even. He would cover the guarantee
Yes.
for the band. Then there would be the door, right? But if the door came up a little short, it's not like George's was going to be like, we'll never book a metal band again. They got their money.
They got
Like,
their money.
It worked out. And
Ruben
so
really went far.
Ruben has
beyond.
really bridged that gap, especially for the heavy music in Northwest Arkansas. I would say he definitely deserves to be in the Hall of Fame.
He absolutely is going in. Another one that's going to go in right behind him is going to be Bradley Korbelic.
Yeah.
With
Those two were
13-0 promotion.
thick as thieves, man. They work together very tightly, and and in the same direction. That's a
Yes.
good example of two people doing a similar thing, but doing it together in ways that impacted more people because they were both doing their own thing, but also coordinating with each other.
Well, that metal community is way larger than I ever could. I mean, I thought I knew all of the musicians in town, and then I'm like, wait, well, I only know them because I know certain people that know everybody.
Right, yeah.
And when you
Yep.
definitely when you want to reach into any form of heavy rock or metal, it's call Ruben or Brad and
that's
ask.
right.
And it's funny, I saw Brad put up a post the other day. Anybody know any bluegrass musicians? I'm like, dude, I can name all of them if you
Yep.
can name all your metal bands.
Yep.
That is again what the beauty of being right here in Northwest Arkansas is we do have, like it or not, but we do have the DIY spaces. We do
Yeah.
have I would be remiss if I didn't bring her up, Miss Chelsea Ware of the Sick House. Again, we don't condone creating problems with your neighbors and or your local police department. However, giving people a space to be creative in
Sure.
where they don't otherwise have a space and creating that community.
Yes.
Again, I
Those are
started the
good
songwriter
things.
circles in her basement
Right.
because of that environment that she created, a little cocoon of this house is a music house. That's all it ever will be.
Yep.
And you're welcome here. So
Yep.
I have to give a nod to Chelsea for fostering the love that she has for our scene.
Yeah.
Now let's just get out of your basement and let's do it in a venue.
Yeah, I mean, that was, it was amazing to watch her do that work because she did so much of that work. And then it was sad to see the things that would happen that would be frustrating,
Yeah.
that were preventable.
Yes.
So then it
There's
was
a
like
lot to be said for the
when-
preventable things.
When we would hit the social media with pride, oh man, the show got shut down. Oh man, stuff got stolen. Oh man, cops shut us down. And it's like, yup.
Is it maybe that we're just old and
No. I mean, to me, if you're going to provide a space for
You're right.
musicians, you need to make it a safe space. You owe that to them. I mean, you're giving them an opportunity, but it needs to be a safe opportunity.
You're
where,
right.
Where they're going to be able to do their thing the best they can do it. Make that impression on those fans and,
Absolutely.
and not have to worry about whether or not the cops are going to be knocking on the door. Because, man, that's a buzzkill.
We're
And
keeping
then
that one.
Also, it brings up the topic of also fans being respectful. Fans need to be respectful. I mean, people can work really hard to set up a festival or a venue or a something, and then the bands have worked so hard to bring their music, and everyone's worked really hard, and you get some jackhole in the venue who decides that they're entitled or just gets too drunk, and then the party goes downhill real quick. So having that security element of when
Yep.
you do have a douche show up, you've got trained professionals who know how to
Absolutely.
remove that douche so that everybody can continue to have a safe and fun time.
Yeah, I think that's the ultimate goal is we are here for the art. Nothing else matters.
That's right.
Let's preserve the art.
That's right. So
I know they don't let me go buck wild in Crystal Bridges. I've tried.
But that's my beef with DIY venues. I think that it's noble. What they're doing is noble. It comes from a place of good intentions.
Yeah.
But it's not thought out in a way that will make it so that it's sustainable. They're never sustainable.
They shouldn't last more than a year.
Right? I mean,
if you're that good at that, maybe you should go get
a venue.
a venue.
Right.
Let's have a venue. Let's have a barn raisin. I'll help build the walls.
And then community venues are a thing as well. There are more and more opportunities for people to tap into resources like the Medium, and there are other places where you can facilitate. Prairie Street Live is another one of those places that will allow those local bands to get that first stage experience.
I have noticed that they're the ones that kind of they'll roll the dice and now I kind of feel like Meteor Guitar Gallery might almost be of the same vein. Les has a venue
Yeah.
and you can how do I
Yeah, no, that's good. Think about what venues can you name in Springdale, Rogers, and Bentonville?
that aren't pubs?
Yeah, I mean like a real music venue. what you would consider a music venue. Like, people go there for the music.
We have the Amp and we have Meteor, but like Meteor is, I don't feel like Meteor is known for booking the greatest concerts. I feel like Meteor is best known for providing an amazing space for a promoter to see as an opportunity.
Yes.
To create a show. I did it myself. We did Rocky Horror Picture Show there.
I'm saying, where do Bentonville bands go to get their start?
Good Vibes. They've remodeled and redone everything, and it's reminiscent of the Bayou.
Okay.
Of the
Yeah,
days when
I
Wendell
remember the
Franklin
Bayou.
had the
Yeah.
Bayou and Rogers. It's almost even
played
set
the
up.
Bayou.
It's almost even set up the same way, where you walk in and there's the bar. The stage is kind of to the left, but with them it's not a stage. It's floor, and then pool tables to the right.
Right.
Very reminiscent of that.
Yeah.
They have done their behind the drum kit, full wall of it's black curtains with lights poking through. So they've done a really good job of making a visual so that even if the band doesn't have a whole lot of people,
Right.
it looks wonderful on
Sweet.
camera. So that's
So those are the places. To me, those places are where the music scene really starts. It's in those places that do give those bands the opportunity to have that first experience on a smaller scale, bring their friends and family out in a safe spot,
yeah.
and then they can prove to the larger, more established venues that they have a following. That is the bleeding edge of the scene, and that's where you can find who's going to be the next Sean James or whoever it's going to be. Like when the White Stripes played JR's Light Bulb Club.
Absolutely. And I think I saw that flyer. Somebody had a copy of that
Yeah,
flyer not long ago.
It recirculated here pretty recently. People
Yeah.
kind of reminisced the fact that happened, so we've had crazy, iconic, legendary. Taylor Swift played Mount Sequoia.
What?
Yeah. Before she was famous, she was coming through on a thing, and Dave and I owned a sound company, and we got a call. It was like, we need the biggest PA we can find on Mount Sequoia because this young up-and-coming country artist named Taylor Swift is playing. And we set up a bunch of PA, and she rolled in, and she played. It was early in her career, and there were just a ton of teenage girls who just were fangirling over her.
Wow.
But that was, before they were famous. So we document it any way we can. I think that what you're doing here is incredible, and then that's been the thing that has been driving me at Fayetteville Public Television, is having the opportunity to put into some sort of historical archive the bands that are doing stuff. We have an entire wall of VHS tapes back there that need to be digitized. Someday, we'll be able to get those digitized, and people will be able to look back, but the technology has brought us to a place where future generations will really be able to look back and get a feel for who was playing what, where, when, like those things. Our history becomes more rich because we're able to actually recall. I'm sure you and I played so many shows that they all become a blur, right? It's like, but all of them had special moments and cool things.
Absolutely.
The more we can document those, the easier it is to hold on to those special moments and share them with future musicians.
Maybe one day we'll have an actual brick and mortar museum. It's a long-term goal, not a short-term one, but it'd be nice to have somewhere where we could, just revisit, our little time capsule of, again, what I feel like we have such a rich history here.
Yep.
You can name the super famous ones, but there were so many people sitting right alongside those guys in those circles, playing those gigs.
That's right.
And I want to talk to them too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks for your time.
You bet. It's my pleasure.
appreciate
Thank
it.
you.